Hello everyone, I'm Erin.scott and thank you for checking out my video today. If you are a new YouTube subscriber or a new viewer to my channel, I hope you enjoy some of the content you're about ready to see. For those who have been around with me for a long time, and I've got a lot of wonderful YouTube family out there, will know that what you're about to see is a pretty incredible accomplishment. Most of my subscribers that have been with me have gotten to follow along. But today I want to give a full-on presentation of what I think is an amazing off-grid hot water, rainwater, water collection, water production system for being off-grid. As you can see, there's a lot that has been done here in the last 90 days. About 90 days ago, beginning of this year, none of this existed. All of it was woods, just as you see out there. We have carved everything out of the woods and installed a homestead. And I'm going to ask you to forgive us for having a lot of construction projects that are still ongoing. As you can see, the house isn't completely covered on the exterior, and the inside is like that as well. But for the most part, as far as this system is concerned, it is operational and has been for a little over a week now, and it's pretty spectacular. So the first thing we're going to do is go over the rainwater collection aspect of it. As you can see, we got a single slope roof that provides all the water to one gutter. Off the back of the gutter, where the downspout would normally be, you can see the white pipe over there that drops in to our tank. We have a process that we use to clean that water in preparation for making use. So because you have, being rainwater collection, we have debris and bird poop and stuff like that we want to take into consideration in not getting it into our water as much as possible. So let's go take a look at that. So simple, most of you have all seen gutters. Here we're just taking the water out of the downspout from the gutter and immediately sending it over to the tank. Normal gutters will collect debris. As you see, we're in the springtime, and the pollen strings off of the oak trees are blowing all over. You see there's a lot of pollen, and in order to protect my water, I've got an initial phase of debris collection. Now it's a couple of pieces of window screen, nylon window screen that I picked up at my local hardware store and siliconed it in over top of the downspout. This works really well, and almost too well, because it does tend to clog very, very easy. However, we're up for the maintenance and are okay to do it, so whenever we get strong winds and we think there's a new weather front coming through, we will clean our gutters. We just do it on a regular basis, and we'll do it. We've had to do it even when we've had heavy rains, because it accumulates rather quickly if it's being blown off the trees while the rain is coming down. And this isn't probably the best method. We're probably going to look at a newer filter that's a lot larger surface area to cover more area. But for now, this is done fairly well. Like I said, we will get this cleaned out, but you can see what I'm trying to stop, and it actually clogs up on the pollen itself because the pollen doesn't want to go through there. So, which is pretty good. It keeps out most of it, but not all of it. So let's see what it's looking like over at the tank. So once the water makes its way down here, we have a bit of a debris trap, catchment trap. Basically, we funnel all the water down into a 1-inch pipe and then back up to a 4-inch pipe here. And down at the bottle, it has about a 1/8 inch weep hole in the bottom to allow water to slowly leak out. Inside here, there is a ping pong ball that will float. So as water the initial water, say after we've done a gutter cleaning, still has pollen and poop and stuff in it. It gets washed off in the first few minutes of a good rain. All that water is going to go through, down, and into this container to slowly drip out later after the rain event. But the ping pong ball will rise up to the point where it acts as a little stopper here, and then once you fill this tank, then all the remaining water, which should be much cleaner, will flow over and in. Now this will continue to a little bit seep in, a little bit at a time. That'll keep all the debris kind of falling down. And then once you do come in, or once it does fill in, drops into the tank. Step up here. And as you can see, due to recent rain events, we are almost completely full. But you can see very little debris in here at all. Okay, you see our 15 to 150 gallon tank here. Comes with a bung hole already, or a drain hole, or whatever you want to call it, already in the bottom. We had to step it down to get to a 1-inch pipe that would go into our water pump. On the debris catchment pipe down there at the bottom, you can see there's that little weep hole, and that's where the trash has been leaking out of there too. I got to come up with a slightly better way to do that. I think I'm going to put a valve in there with a slightly bigger hole for quicker evacuation of the tank, of this little trash canister tank. But it's working pretty good right now. If I didn't mention it before, this entire system was done on a bit of a budget, which is pretty incredible to see what we've accomplished with the budget that we've got. I'll go over the costs when we're at the end, but you can see this is a Harbor Freight shallow well pump, and they generally run about 115 or so. Like I said, we'll talk about that. But we've got the water coming in, check valve, in order to prevent from backflowing into the tank, through the pump, a T over here to allow me to do a garden hose, or for fire prevention to be able to take off on the outside out here. And then I have a main valve down there which goes to the house, and then that line runs under the house and ties in over there. Here's where the water comes in. That little trench goes out right here, and then it turns and comes up. We've got another valve for disconnect here to isolate this section, and I've got a dual filtration system, so I can have one for particulates, and then I also have one that's a carbon filter in order to assist with making sure flavors and whatnot when we do go to filtering out the water. So it's a dual filtration system in order to make sure we really kind of get it good. Another valve for disconnect, or a separation, and then I turn it over to copper. So this is the cold water coming up. I have a takeoff for my sink, and then we go above the sink and run up to the ceiling. And this is one of the things that we wanted to do in our place, was to have exposed copper, because we wanted to see it, and eventually we will polish all the copper up and make it nice and shiny. So that's the extent of the rainwater collection system and the piping that brings it in. It's actually pretty simple. Like I said, when I get into the budget, you're going to be pretty surprised by just how low the cost can be on putting in this system like that. Now that I've gone over the rainwater portion of this system, let's take a look at the heating element, or the hot water side of things, because that is where this system really shines, and has within the last week since we've had it finally up and running, we have had amazing results in its efficiency and its ability to provide us with more hot water than we basically know what to do with. So when I started my YouTube channel back, was it 2014 or 15, about 4 or 5 years ago, when I put up the first video I did. One of the first videos I did was to go over this system and to share the concept that I was working on. And it was a little bit of a rough video, and I was new to doing YouTube, and basically all I wanted to do was get the concept out there of how this works. In that video I said that I was really looking forward to setting this up with full-on copper pipes in a permanent situation. Now that I've got it running, like I said, I'm just immensely amazed at how efficient and how great this thing works. So if you look back over here, you got the cold water up, and the cold water comes up to here and then tees off. Now I got cold water running back that way for the shower, and then cold water going this way. And here, let's use this for a pointer. So the cold water comes over and zigzags over into the cold water side of the water tank. That water tank is a standard household 40-gallon water tank. And why did I choose it? Well, because it was available. It was easy to deal with. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, you built everything else. Why didn't you build a tank? Because I can't do a good as job for the cost. I think they were like $289 or $259, something like that, for a standard 40-gallon. Now, I've never really used the electrical side of this. Everything has been for the thermal siphon portion of the system, tied into our wood stove. Now, once it makes it up into the tank there, what we need is a thermal siphon loop to our heat sources. So what we had to do is pull out the drain plug down here and loop it down to the low side of our two sources. Now the one source is the wood stove, and it's still got a little bit of heat in it. We ran a small fire this morning because it was kind of cool. But it tees off, and it can go either out to the solar panel or into the wood stove. Inside the wood stove, come around, is still a little remnants of the fire, but you can see the hot water jacket on the side here. It's amazing how small a fire you can put in here and just rake the coals up, not heating the house very much at all, especially if it's getting warmer, but you want some warm water and it's cloudy and you can't do it with the solar panel. Doesn't take much of a small fire here to keep that hot water jacket making hot water. Then once you get heated up, it comes back out and it moves up the line to another T. And this T goes out to the top of the solar panel outside. Now you'll notice I have two shut-off valves here. Ooh, that's really hot. Almost. Yeah, it's really cooking because the solar panel is working out there pretty well. So you got to build in the potential for weather changes. So if I ever need to isolate the solar panel away from the system, and I have had to do that in the installation process, I have the ability with both of these valves to turn it off and stop the flow outside, or to potentially drain it. I'll explain that here in a bit. One of the things I've learned in doing this in the installation is that it actually works too well. And what I mean by that is, in the first video I put the whole system together using PVC and CPVC for the hot side of the loop. Wasn't very good because, when I overcooked the water and it would boil inside the hot water jacket, what would happen is the water would blow back through the cold line, because we were in learning lessons and we were running it much more than we needed to because of the situations that we were in. well, what we found out was that wasn't good for the pipes. So what we figured out is why this thing works too good is because now that I've got copper piping, it conducts the heat a whole lot better. And as you can see on the upper part of the hot water, where the hot water goes back in, up there I've had to cover some of the piping with some of the insulation tubing that you can pick up in order to insulate your pipes. What was happening, and I don't know, maybe those of you who decide to incorporate some kind of system like this can maybe improve upon this system, is it was reverse siphoning. So after the sun would go down, the hot water would start to come back out, cool down, and then drop and reverse siphon through the water jacket. And by morning we were losing some temperature, and that was in the first few days. Now I've managed to almost stop that by putting some insulation on, and I could probably put some more in down to here. And what we would need to do is make sure that the upper portion of the loop equal to the or level with the bottom of the tank was insulated all the way down. And my only main concern with this, and I'm not sure how I'm going to handle it, whether I insulate it more or not, but I'm not liking the idea of the foam being up against the pipe, too close to the pipe there, so that's why I didn't run it down. I'm going to run it like this and see how well it works. If it does, I could maybe find a high heat resistant type of insulation. Maybe if somebody were to install this, they might run the pipe a little further away from the flue pipe so that there wouldn't be an issue. But I wanted my loop, my thermal siphon loop, to be very, very compact and very tight, because with it doing that, it is extremely efficient when it comes to heating the water. So we got a thermal siphon loop through the copper, through the hot water jacket, and up and out. And then let's take a look at these two legs, and let's go outside and see how the solar hot water panel looks. So I put some of that insulation in the hot side of the pipe up here to try and maintain holding in some of that heat too. And you can see where the cold comes out, turns down, and we have a drain valve, so that, like I said, with the two valves on the inside there, I could shut this off, isolate this, drain this if I didn't want to run it, say, in the winter time. So I have the ability to do both. I've been thinking through it, and I'm almost for sure that I'll be able to let this thing run year-round, even in some cold, harsh temperatures, if I go ahead and insulate this outer pipe. Well, hello. Shadow's always got a photobomb my videos. So let's talk about our solar hot water panel here. I built this, what was it, almost 3 years ago. Almost 3 years ago I built this, and essentially all you have is a big manifold with a whole bunch of half-inch pipe running vertical, and a 3/4 pipe along the bottom and a 3/4 pipe along the top with a bunch of T's soldered together. And it was kind of interesting for those of you who have been following my progress here, and you knew that, you know, I told you that there was a leak. Let's talk about that. There's this one piece of flashing that was right here that when we pressurized the system and hooked it up, we were getting a small drip from underneath here, and the only thing I could consider could comprehend it maybe being is that it was an abrasion spot on the pipe, because there's no solder welds or anything here. It wasn't coming from up top, it was coming from here. And in the last week of running it, it has sealed itself. So whatever debris or micro particles that were in the water have found their way to clog that, and we don't have it leaking anymore, which is pretty interesting. Those of you who are wondering about why you're seeing this big white spot here, those are styrofoam panels for the backing to help insulate the heat. When I first built this, had a little boo-boo. I did not realize how how strong a panel I was going to be making. What happened was, we got done, and then to clean up the work table where we were working, we grabbed it by the handles, because this thing's like 200 and something pounds. It's huge. It's heavy with the big glass panels, because it's a double pane piece of glass right here. We picked it up and we set it on the back of the truck, and it was laying there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and I went over to move it back, and the manifold didn't have any water in it. And because it didn't have any water in it, it didn't have anything to absorb the heat. So the thing acted like a solar oven and just cooked the inside. Well, I had to check to see what it was. But when I did a lookup online, I said, well, what's the melting point of styrofoam? Because that's what was happening. It was getting hot enough that the styrofoam itself was actually melting. Turns out it's 465 degrees. So that tells you just how hot it can get, and probably hotter if the conditions were right. Now, I don't want that, but there are some other things that I need to do. One is I need to seal this up, and I didn't want to caulk and seal the joints on this yet until I got it fixed in place. I wanted that to be one of the last things I was doing, and since there was a leak, I was going to hold off on that a little bit longer. However, now that the leak seems to have magically, don't ask me how, but being clogged up or whatever, has sealed itself, I think I'm going to go ahead and seal it. Then I need to put another coat of paint, a good coat of paint on the wood box frame in order to protect it. And what else do I need to do? Oh, and I'm going to build basically a big cover for this, because this thing works so well, and there's a potential that somewhere down the road that we may leave, go for a vacation or something like that, and I may wish to basically turn this portion of my system off, in which case I want to put a panel in front of it that will prevent the sun from heating it up, and then I will shut both of the valves, and I'll open the drain valve there and empty the system for the period of time that I don't want to use it. So we have our thermal siphon through the wood stove, and we got our thermal siphon through our solar hot water panel, and in, like I said, the last week or so, it has been incredible the amount of hot water that we've had, very easily heating up that 40-gallon tank in a day. Now let's talk about how that's working based on this. It's what I've observed is on a good sunny day like this, which is crystal clear blue skies, if you're just letting the solar panel run, that it seems to siphon at about a 30-degree temperature difference, roughly. And what I found out is it'll siphon around, it'll start siphoning around 30. So when this gets a little bit 30 degrees warmer than the water that's in the tank, that's when it starts moving. But generally, once it gets going and we're in this full sun, it is putting water out about 40 degrees hotter than what's coming in. So the water that's coming in is rising by about 40 degrees. So if you got cold rainwater that's 50, 60 degrees, the first time it makes its pass, it brings it up to about 85 to 90 degrees. You can hold the pipe and you can tell it's warm. We even took a shower in that temperature water because it's about body temperature. You could do that, and it takes about 4 hours, I think it was the first day, 4 hours to cycle the whole tank. Then it kept going, and once we could tell that the temperature of the water coming out of the tank and through the drain side on the bottom was the temperature that what we were feeling that was coming out of the top pipe here, it shifted it up, and then the next level of water temperature jumped it up to about 130, 135 degrees. Pretty darn hot. That's a lot of people will keep their tanks at about that pressure, or that temperature, excuse me. And then it did another cycle. And in the last 2 days, we've had some good sun during the day, on top of us doing a small fire in the morning. So we've really been putting both heat sources into it at the same time. And what that's done is got our water temperature way up to beyond the point of comfort. I think I was measuring some of the temperatures about 170 degrees, 160, 170 degrees, which still leaves us enough room so that if it had to cycle again, we could still do that, and I think not get the tank to the point where we're anywhere near the boiling temperature, but up there near the 200 degree point. Now, one of the things we've been talking about is because we make so much hot water, what are we going to do with our system out here in the wintertime? People have been asking, well, how are you going to handle that in the wintertime? Well, if we're in a position where we're running the wood stove to keep warm in there and we're heating up too much water, I think what we're going to end up doing is setting up some kind of flow back or pump back so that we can take a hot tank of water, empty it back into our tank outside here to bring up that temperature and let that act as a heat sink next to the tank. So as you can see inside our little box there, the tank is basically going to radiate its heat into the well compartment. So if we could cycle that maybe during the wintertime a couple of times to keep that tank moving, I think that would just act as just enough of a heat source with everything else being insulated around it. Now, those of you who have been with me a long time through this last 3 months of building this, remember me telling you I am going to put a roof over here and we'll put a roof over the container and the tank to protect it from the sun, and then we're going to do an awning to it, which will be a greenhouse. So hopefully we will eventually have this entire system in a structure that will prevent it from ever having to deal with below freezing temperatures that will be dangerous to possibly, breaking pipes and stuff. But other than that, we are, like I said, we are immensely excited that not only is the system up and running, but it is extremely efficient, and it just works great. We're proud of it. We're very proud. So let's talk about costs. Okay, set aside your roof costs. Putting in the gutter and the piping, all the piping into the tank was about $100. The tank itself was kind of pricey. I think I paid nearly $1,300 to have it delivered. I think I overpaid for it too, because I found one in a local paper for under $700 at a regular price. So that's a pretty big price difference. I don't know what it'll be in your area, but a 1,550 gallon tank, I was pretty good. I think I could have done better, but I'm gonna add another one. Oh, and let's talk about that. Eventually, quantity of use. I know I'm bouncing around here, but I got a lot of thoughts. I'm trying to give you all the data that I can. I do intend to get another 1,550 gallon tank because T and I have done our math, and we can get away with about 400 to 500 gallons a month if we are fairly conservative with our water usage. Just our normal showers, dishwashing, and that kind of thing, because we're composting our human manure. Then it's we're not using water for flushing. So if we're just showering with it and washing dishes with it, 400 to 500 gallons. So that's nearly 3 months worth of water that we have available in that tank. I would probably hazard to say, well, we're probably going to water a plant or two in our pots, and who knows, whatever. Let's be more conservative and say, well, we're going to use 600 to 700 gallons. It's still 2 months worth of water for us. I want to be able to store up to as much as 4 months. So at some point in time, we're going to get another 1,550 gallon tank to set next to it, because hey, we've lost some water here since we've been here, and we could have probably had 300 or 400 gallons in a new tank already because of the amount of rain that we've gotten. It'd be nice to have the insurance of as much as 4 months worth of water, because we get into the dry months sometimes, and in August, September, October, we could go for a while without getting a significant amount of rain. It's possible. It does happen. Pardon me. So, about $100 in gutter and pipe to get it to the tank. About $1,300 for the tank. I think you can do better. Because we got a Harbor Freight well pump, that was about $120. Plumbing to get it into the house was, you know, $20 for a bunch of elbows, tees, and pipe. It's not that much. Water filtration, I think those units were $30 each. They're about 30, so it's about $60 for the dual filters. The copper pipe I purchased way back when I did the panel, so I've had that with me before I even got here, but there's about $200 in copper for the plumbing. Not too bad. The tank, of course, if you can find a used one that, you know, somebody's got a tank that's got a burned out element, or they just replace it or whatever. The tank, you could move around on the price on that. I think new ones are like $289 or something like that. I would always recommend going with a bigger tank than you think you need. So a lot of homes now have smaller tanks because people are trying to cut back on their energy consumption, so they go to a smaller one that cycles over more as opposed to a big one that just sits there. I would recommend a bigger one because if you're going to do an off-grid system, you want to hold a bigger thermal mass that you can. So on the cost of the panel, I did build it a few years ago, and if I can remember to, I might leave a link up here to how I built it. But the point is this, cost-wise, I have to remember the materials. A lot of materials I got were recycled, or at least the box materials. The copper piping was probably in the $200 range for the copper piping. The aluminum flashing was only a few bucks. Hardware, a few bucks. These boards were free. I think we got them. They were part of some shipping materials that we would get from a company. The handles we bought were only a couple bucks at. The handles were only a couple bucks at the Restore. We got them at Habitat Restore. The insulation was new, and quite frankly, I can't remember how much they were a panel. About $20 a panel or something like that.
Probably.
A couple panels there, and you know, a couple cans of matte black paint. Black paint, $5 a can for about 2 cans. The glass. That's going to be the challenging part, and would make your project costs vary. I managed to get these that were pulled out of a house that had some fire damage from one of the forest fires that was up there in the Bitterroot Valley. So I got it for, I think it was $30, and that was just from the local glass dealer. You could probably find some old sliding glass doors or something that you could recycle to build it with. Total cost under $300 for all the materials on the solar hot water panel. Now let's talk about the cost on the wood stove. All right, so on the wood stove was one of the bigger costs because in order to get all the metal and costs for welding if you don't have a welder, that kind of thing, because I built this from scratch. This is probably one of the most labor intensive parts of the and cost intensive parts of no, I take it back. The tank would have been. I probably got close to $300 in materials on my tank and my water jacket. Cost a lot of money for the metal, and then welding it up, well, that was all on me to do. So material costs, you can see, it's not that much if you're willing to put the system together yourself. If you have the skill sets to do some welding, some skill sets to do some plumbing, sweat and copper pipe is pretty easy if you can get the hang of it. If you're fairly competent. Not too bad for the costs. As far as the way the system is, for all intents and purposes, with the exception of two things that I'm going to do to continue to upgrade this system. This is it. This is it, and this is what I intend to live the rest of my life on, because this is going to be my house to live in. This is our property, and this is what I want. It is going to require management. I mean, it's not something you can flip a switch and walk away from. It does require some management. We want to know what's going on, but it is part of our homesteading techniques, or our self-sufficiency mindset, that we want to monitor our system. So we're always checking our water level. We're always checking our gutter until we can get a slightly more effective filtration for the big stuff. Everything else seems to be working fine in the way I would want it. Like I said, there's only a couple things that I would do to upgrade. On the outside here, I'm going to put 2 unions. So I'm going to cut those 2 outside pipes and put some unions in there so it's not all solid. And if I need to work on that panel because there was a leak in it, right now it's not leaking, but if I ever have to disconnect it, I don't want to have to sweat the pipes apart. I want to be able to unscrew it and disconnect it. So at some point I'm going to add a couple unions, and the other thing I'm going to do is put 1 valve in here somewhere in the cycle loop to handle this issue of reverse siphoning at night, to lock down the movement of the water, so that I don't have to worry about losing the heat at night. Otherwise, to keep it more efficient where I can, I will insulate it. I'm probably going to get a little bit more insulation on these pipes, which means I don't get it exposed as much as I'd like, but I'll have to compromise. Anyway, I hope I've answered just about all of your questions by touching on all the points. The cost points, like I said, it's not that bad. Why we don't use these systems to start with, I don't know. We have the technology that we could automate this system with thermal switches and computer guided and tracking and all the stuff that we could use to actually turn this into a hands-off system. Would be very easy for corporations and companies to put together products that would do that. Now, why they don't? Because they want to charge us. So I would encourage you to consider looking into some one of these types of systems, because it's extremely satisfying to know that you can put together something for yourself that will provide you with the water systems and the hot water that you would need without the dependency on any other system. So it's been a long video here. Again, if you're new to my channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button down there and the notification bell, because I do put up videos on a fairly regular basis. Not as often as I used to, because I used to do it almost daily. Now, because I'm off grid, a couple times a week I'm trying to get videos up. And you know, thanks for stopping by. For all of my long-term subs, I promised you I was going to get you this. I hope you really like what I put together. It's been a long, hard project, but for all the sweating that I've done, it has been so worth it. This has been a real gem for us to get going. On that note, we'll catch you in the next video.